I stood there in that luxury cabin bathroom, staring at the pregnancy test in my shaking hands, knowing the man sleeping in the next room wasn't supposed to be my future. 3 days ago, I was a divorced kindergarten teacher who couldn't even afford the ski trip, and now I'm holding a secret that could destroy a billionaire's entire world. The crazy part? I crashed into him on purpose. Welcome to DramaCoda. Stay with me till the very end because this story takes turns you won't see coming. Drop a like and tell me in the comments. Rate this story 1 to 10. Let me back up because you need to understand how a woman like me ends up in a situation like this. My name is Rebecca Thompson, but everyone calls me Becky, and 6 months before that pregnancy test, I was standing in a courtroom watching my marriage of 12 years get dissolved in exactly 47 minutes. My ex-husband didn't even look at me when the judge signed the papers. He was too busy texting the 24-year-old dental hygienist he'd been sleeping with for the past 2 years. The same dental hygienist who cleaned my teeth every 6 months and told me I had a beautiful smile. You want to know what divorce does to a 38-year-old woman? It makes you invisible. Not dramatically invisible, not movie scene invisible, just quietly erased from the world you thought you belonged to. The couples we used to hang out with stopped inviting me to dinner parties. My mother kept asking when I was going to start dating again, as if I could just download an app and replace 12 years like you'd replace a broken phone. And the worst part, the part that kept me up at night staring at my bedroom ceiling, was that I'd spent my entire adult life being someone's wife, and now I didn't know who I was supposed to be. I teach kindergarten at Riverside Elementary in Columbus, Ohio. 23 5-year-olds who think I hung the moon, who bring me drawings of stick-figure families and tell me I'm prettier than their moms. I love those kids with everything in me, but when you go home to an empty apartment that still smells like his cologne even though he took all his stuff 8 months ago, those stick-figure drawings start to feel like a reminder of everything you don't have. Everyone around me was building families, and I was teaching other people's children how to tie their shoes. My best friend Jackie, she's the school nurse, she's the one who convinced me to take this trip. Christmas break was coming up, and she'd won some contest at the grocery store, 2 lift tickets, and 2 nights at a budget hotel near Vail. She couldn't go because her dad was having surgery, so she just gave them to me. Merry Christmas, Becky. Go find yourself, or whatever people do when they're trying to get over their ex-husbands. I almost didn't go. I'd never been skiing in my life, couldn't afford the equipment rental, couldn't afford anything really because teacher salaries in Ohio don't exactly leave room for luxury vacations. But something in me snapped the week before Christmas. I was sitting in my classroom after all the kids had gone home, cutting out construction paper snowflakes for the windows, and I realized I'd spent the last 6 months waiting. Waiting to feel better, waiting to feel like myself again, waiting for my life to start making sense. And I was tired of waiting. So I maxed out my credit card, bought a plane ticket, rented the cheapest ski equipment I could find, and flew to Colorado with absolutely no plan except to not spend Christmas alone in my apartment eating frozen lasagna and watching Hallmark movies. The resort was nothing like I expected. I'd imagined some cozy little town, maybe some charming bed and breakfast where people sat by fireplaces and drank hot chocolate. Instead, it was all wealth. Obscene in your face, Lobo, you'll never have wealth. Women in fur coats that cost more than my annual salary. Men in designer ski gear, talking on their phones about mergers and acquisitions. And me, Rebecca Thompson from Ohio, in my rented equipment that didn't quite fit right and my 10-year-old winter coat from Target. I spent the first day on the bunny slope, falling on my face every 30 seconds while 8-year-olds zoomed past me like it was nothing. My instructor was this 19-year-old kid named Brad who kept saying things like just feel the mountain and let your body flow with the terrain, which is absolutely useless advice when you're a middle-aged woman who's never felt anything flow in her entire life. But I kept getting up. Every single time I fell, I got back up, because that's what you do when you're trying to prove to yourself that you're not completely broken. Day 2, December 23rd, that's when everything changed. I woke up with bruises on top of bruises, every muscle in my body screaming at me to stay in bed. But I didn't fly 2,000 miles to give up after one day, so I took 3 ibuprofen, suited up, and headed back out to the slopes. The bunny slope was too crowded, full of families with their matching ski outfits and their perfect children who'd probably never experienced a single day of disappointment in their lives. So I took the lift up to one of the intermediate slopes, even though I had absolutely no business being there. That's where I saw him for the first time. Nathan Cross. Except I didn't know his name yet, didn't know he was worth $4.3 billion, didn't know he'd built a tech empire from nothing and sold it for an amount of money my brain couldn't even process. All I saw was this man standing at the top of the slope, looking at his phone with this expression on his face like he wanted to throw it off the mountain. He was tall, probably 6'2", dark hair going silver at the temples, wearing ski gear that probably cost more than my car. And he looked miserable. I'm not proud of what I did next, but I'm not going to lie about it either. I aimed for him. Not to hurt him, just to bump into him. Maybe knock his phone out of his hand. Create one of those meet-cute moments you see in movies where two people crash into each other and sparks fly and everyone lives happily ever after. I was desperate and lonely and tired of being invisible, and something about the way he was standing there, completely isolated even though he was surrounded by people, made me think maybe he was lonely too. Except I'm a terrible skier, remember? So what was supposed to be a gentle bump turned into a full-speed collision that sent both of us tumbling down the slope in a tangle of skis and poles and limbs. We must have rolled 30 feet before we finally stopped, him on top of me, both of us covered in snow, his face about 2 inches from mine. And the first thing he said, the very first words Nathan Cross ever spoke to me, was, "Did you just take me out on purpose?" I should have been embarrassed. I should have apologized and skied away and died of shame in my hotel room. But something about the way he said it, with this little smile playing at the corner of his mouth like he couldn't decide if he was annoyed or amused, made me laugh. Just this big, ridiculous laugh that came from somewhere deep in my chest, the first real laugh I'd had in months. And I said, "Maybe I did. You going to sue me?" He rolled off me and sat up in the snow, brushing powder off his jacket. "I could," he said. "I have several lawyers on retainer who'd love a case this straightforward." But he was smiling now, a real smile that made his whole face change. "Or you could buy me a drink and we'll call it even." That's how it started. 1 drink at the lodge turned into 3. 3 drinks turned into dinner at this restaurant I definitely couldn't afford, where he insisted on paying because it was his fault for being in your way, which we both knew was a complete lie. We talked for 4 hours. He told me he was in technology, which I later learned was like saying Jeff Bezos is in online shopping. I told him I was a kindergarten teacher, which he seemed genuinely interested in, asking questions about my students and what it was like working with kids all day. He didn't mention his fiancée. I didn't mention my divorce. There was this moment, right before we left the restaurant, when he looked at me with these intense gray eyes and said, "I haven't enjoyed talking to someone this much and longer than I can remember." And I felt it, that dangerous flutter in my chest, that feeling I thought I'd never feel again after my marriage ended. That maybe, just maybe, I was allowed to want something for myself. We exchanged numbers. He texted me before I even made it back to my hotel. Just 3 words, tomorrow. Same time. And even though every rational part of my brain was screaming that this was a bad idea, that men like him don't fall for women like me, that I was setting myself up for disappointment, I texted back, yes. December 24th, Christmas Eve. The resort was even more crowded, families everywhere celebrating the holiday, and I felt that familiar pang of loneliness that comes with being single during the most family-oriented time of year. But then I saw Nathan waiting for me at the base of the slopes, and that loneliness just evaporated. We spent the morning skiing together, him patiently teaching me techniques that Brad the Flow with the mountain instructor had completely failed to explain. He was kind about it too, never making me feel stupid or clumsy, just encouraging and present in a way that made me feel like I was the only person on the mountain. Around noon, the weather started to change. The sky went from bright blue to this ominous gray, and the temperature dropped so fast I could see my breath turning to ice crystals in the air. The resort started announcing over the loudspeakers that a major storm was coming, that everyone should head down immediately, that the lifts would be closing in 30 minutes. But Nathan looked at me with this mischievous expression and said, "I know a place. A cabin up on the North Ridge. We can wait out the storm there." I should have said no. I should have gone back to my budget hotel room and waited out the storm alone like a sensible person. But there was something in his voice, something urgent and almost desperate, like he needed this as much as I did. So I said yes. And we skied away from the resort, away from the crowds and the safety and the normal world, up toward the mountains where the snow was already starting to fall so thick I could barely see 10 feet in front of me. The cabin was incredible. Not some rustic little shack, but this massive luxury retreat with floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over the mountains, a stone fireplace that took up an entire wall, furniture that looked like it belonged in a magazine. Nathan explained it belonged to a friend of his, that he had permission to use it whenever he wanted, that we'd be completely safe here until the storm passed. He didn't mention that his friend was probably also a billionaire, that this cabin probably cost more than every house on my street in Ohio combined. We got inside just as the storm really hit. The wind was howling so loud it sounded like the mountain itself was screaming, snow piling up against the windows, so fast I could watch it accumulate in real time. Nathan got the fireplace going while I explored the cabin, finding a kitchen stocked with enough food for a week. Bedrooms with beds, so big you could fit 5 people in them comfortably, a bathroom with a tub I could practically swim in. "Looks like we're stuck here for a while," Nathan said, coming up behind me as I stood at the window watching the storm. His voice was casual, but there was something underneath it, something charged and electric that made my skin tingle. "Looks like," I said, and when I turned around, he was standing closer than I expected, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to look at him. "Rebecca," he said, and the way he said my full name instead of Becky made it sound like something precious. "I need to tell you something." That's when my phone rang. Jackie, calling from Ohio to make sure I hadn't died in an avalanche. I stepped away to answer it, and when I came back 5 minutes later, whatever Nathan was going to say had disappeared. He'd changed the subject, started making hot chocolate, and the moment was gone. But I could feel it hanging in the air between us. This thing we were both avoiding, this truth that was going to come out eventually whether we wanted it to or not. We spent the afternoon like 2 normal people trapped in a cabin by a snowstorm. We played cards with a deck we found in a drawer. We made dinner together, nothing fancy, just pasta and sauce from the pantry, but it felt intimate working side by side in that kitchen. We talked about everything and nothing, carefully dancing around the personal stuff, the real stuff. He told me about growing up poor in Detroit, about working 3 jobs to put himself through community college, about the first company he started in his garage that failed spectacularly. I told him about growing up in a small town where everyone knew everyone else's business, about how I'd wanted to be a writer when I was young but settled for teaching because it was practical, about the dream I'd given up. "Why'd you give it up?" he asked, and the way he looked at me when he said it, like my answer actually mattered, made my throat tight. "Because dreams don't pay the bills," I said. "Because everyone told me writing wasn't a real career. Because I was scared I wasn't good enough." I paused, surprised by how honest I was being. Because I married someone who thought my dreams were cute hobbies instead of actual goals. Nathan set down his wine glass. "Your ex-husband sounds like an idiot." "My ex-husband is a lot of things," I said. "But mostly he's just someone who stopped seeing me. I became invisible to him. Just this person who existed in the background of his life, cooking his dinners and doing his laundry and being grateful he chose me. And then he found someone younger and prettier who made him feel important again, and I became completely erased." That's when Nathan took my hand. Just reached across the table and took it, his thumb rubbing small circles on my palm. "You're not invisible," he said. "You're the most visible person I've met in years." Oh my God, it's getting emotional over here. Tell me in the comments the emotion you're feeling right now. Happy, sad, curious? It's about to take on a whole new level. The wind was shaking the windows, the fire was crackling, and I was holding hands with a man I'd known for exactly 2 days, feeling more seen than I'd felt in my entire marriage. And then he kissed me. Soft at first, tentative, like he was asking permission. And I kissed him back, harder, desperate, like I was trying to prove to both of us that I was still alive, still capable of wanting something, still allowed to feel this way. We moved to the couch in front of the fireplace, and things got intense fast. His hands in my hair, my hands under his shirt, both of us breathing hard and pulling at each other's clothes like we were starving. And then he stopped. Just pulled back suddenly, his chest heaving, looking at me with this expression that was equal parts desire and agony. "I can't do this," he said. I felt like I'd been slapped. All that heat, all that want, just gone in an instant, replaced by cold rejection. I started to stand up, started to gather my dignity and leave, but he grabbed my wrist. "I can't do this because I'm not being honest with you," he said. "I'm engaged. I'm supposed to get married in 6 days on New Year's Eve, to a woman named Veronica who's been planning this wedding for 2 years. And I'm here with you instead of at the resort with her because I've been trying to work up the courage to call it off for the past 3 months. The world tilted sideways. Engaged. Of course he was engaged. Men like Nathan Cross don't just happen to be single and available and skiing alone on Christmas Eve. They have fiancés, probably perfect, beautiful fiancés who wear designer clothes and know how to order wine and never crash into people on ski slopes because they're desperate for attention. You should have told me, I said, and I hated how my voice shook. I know. I should have told you yesterday. I should have told you the second we met. But I was being selfish because for the first time in I don't know how long, I was talking to someone who didn't want something from me, who didn't know who I was or what I was worth, who just liked me because I made her laugh. He ran his hand through his hair, frustrated. Veronica, she's not a bad person. She's beautiful and smart and comes from the right family and knows how to navigate my world. But she's also controlling and calculating and treats our relationship like it's a business merger. And I've been going along with it because that's what you're supposed to do when you reach a certain level of success. You marry someone appropriate, someone who fits. And I don't fit, I said flatly. You don't fit, he agreed. You crash into me on mountains and laugh at yourself and teach kindergarten and tell me the truth even when it's uncomfortable. You don't fit into my world at all, and that's exactly why I can't stop thinking about you. I should have walked away. I should have gone to one of the bedrooms and locked the door and waited out the storm and never spoken to Nathan Cross again. But I'm going to tell you something I've learned about heartbreak and loneliness and spending years in a marriage where you felt invisible. It makes you reckless. It makes you think that maybe, just maybe, you deserve to be selfish for once in your life. Then don't stop, I said. Don't think about what you're supposed to do or who you're supposed to be. Just for tonight, just for however long we're stuck in this cabin, don't think at all. He looked at me for a long moment, and I could see him making the decision. See the exact moment when he chose to stop being responsible and start being reckless. And then he kissed me again, and this time neither of us stopped. We made love in front of that fireplace like two people who'd been holding their breath for years and finally came up for air. It was desperate and intense and probably the most honest thing either of us had done in a long time. And afterward, lying there with my head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat slow down, I felt something I hadn't felt since my divorce. I felt wanted. Not needed, not convenient, not appropriate. Wanted. We didn't sleep much that night. We talked until 3 a.m. Really talked, the kind of conversation where you tell each other the ugly truths you usually keep hidden. He told me about his fiancée Veronica, how they'd met at a charity gala 3 years ago, how she'd pursued him aggressively, how their relationship had always felt more like a strategic alliance than a romance. He told me about the pressure from his business partners and investors to settle down, to look stable and mature, to have a perfect wife who could host the right parties and say the right things. He told me he'd proposed to Veronica not because he loved her, but because it was expected, because he was tired of fighting against what everyone said he should do. I told him about my marriage, about how I'd married my high school sweetheart because I was 22 and thought love was supposed to be comfortable and easy. I told him about the years of slowly fading into the background, of becoming less a person and more a function, wife-shaped and convenient. I told him about finding the texts from the dental hygienist, about confronting my husband and watching him shrug like he'd been caught eating the last cookie instead of betraying 12 years of trust. I told him about the divorce, about sitting in my apartment afterward feeling like I'd wasted my entire adult life on someone who never really saw me. I see you, Nathan said, pulling me closer. I know we barely know each other, I know this is crazy, but I see you, Rebecca. And I don't want to stop seeing you. That should have been my first warning. When someone tells you something that perfect, that movie dialogue romantic, you should probably ask questions. But I was too caught up in the feeling, in the warmth of his arms and the way he said my name like it was important. Christmas morning, we woke up tangled together on the couch, the storm still raging outside. The power had gone out sometime in the night, but the cabin had a backup generator, so we had heat and light and all the supplies we needed. It felt like we were the only two people in the world, isolated from reality by walls of snow and wind. Nathan made breakfast while I showered in that ridiculous luxury bathroom. I stood under water that felt like it was coming from heaven itself, and I let myself imagine what it would be like if this was my life. If I was the kind of woman who woke up in mountain cabins and had men like Nathan make her breakfast and didn't have to worry about credit card bills and teacher salaries and going back to Ohio to face another year of being alone. But that's the thing about fantasies. They're lovely while they last, but reality always comes knocking eventually. We spent Christmas Day in that cabin, and it was one of the best days of my life. We watched old movies on the huge TV, cooked together, made love again in one of those enormous beds, talked about everything and nothing. Nathan told me about his company, about the technology they'd developed that revolutionized online security, about selling it for billions and suddenly having more money than he knew what to do with. I told him about my students, about little Jaden who still couldn't say his RS and called me Miss Rebecca, about Sophia who brought me dandelions every day and said I was beautiful. "You'd be a good mom," Nathan said, and something in my chest cracked. "My ex-husband didn't think so," I said quietly. "We tried for 5 years. Nothing ever happened. Doctors said there was no medical reason, that it was just bad luck or stress or maybe we weren't meant to have children." He blamed me. Never said it outright, but I could see it in the way he looked at me, like I was defective, like I'd failed at the one job women are supposed to be able to do. Nathan turned to face me fully. "Your ex-husband is even more of an idiot than I thought." Maybe, I said. Or maybe he was right. Maybe I am defective. "No," Nathan said firmly. "You're not defective. You're perfect exactly as you are. And any man who made you feel like you weren't is someone who never deserved you in the first place." I started crying then. These big, ugly sobs that came from somewhere deep, and Nathan just held me and let me cry. He didn't try to fix it or make me feel better, or tell me to stop. He just held me. And that's when I knew I was in trouble. Because you can't fall in love with someone in 3 days. That's not how real life works. Except I was falling anyway, tumbling head over heels into something that was absolutely going to destroy me. That night, after dinner, Nathan got serious. "I need to call Veronica," he said. "I need to tell her I'm not going through with the wedding." My heart stopped. "Nathan, don't do that because of me. Don't blow up your life because of 3 days in a cabin. This isn't real. This is just a moment outside of time, and when we leave here, we go back to our real lives." "What if I don't want to go back?" he said. "What if this right here is more real than anything I've experienced in years?" "You're worth $4 billion, I said. "I teach kindergarten in Ohio. I live in a 600-square-foot apartment, and my car is 12 years old, and I had to max out my credit card to afford this trip. We don't live in the same world, Nathan. This doesn't work outside of this cabin." "Money doesn't matter," he said. And I laughed, harsh and bitter. "Money always matters. Money is the only thing that matters. You can say it doesn't because you have enough of it that you never have to think about it. But for people like me, money is the difference between eating and not eating, between having healthcare and going without, between staying in a bad situation and having the freedom to leave. So don't tell me money doesn't matter." Nathan grabbed both my hands. "Then let me give you some. Let me set you up so you never have to worry about money again. Let me take care of you." That's when I pulled away. I don't want to be taken care of. I spent 12 years being taken care of by a man who used it as leverage to keep me small and grateful. I don't want your money, Nathan. I don't want to be some kept woman, some mistress you set up in a nice apartment while you live your real life with your real fiancé. "She won't be my fiancé after tonight," he said. "I'm calling her right now. I'm ending it." And he did. I sat there on the couch and watched Nathan Cross, tech billionaire, call his fiancée on Christmas night and break her heart. I couldn't hear her side of the conversation, but I could hear his. "I can't marry you, Veronica. I'm sorry. I've known for months that this was wrong, and I've been too much of a coward to admit it. You deserve someone who loves you the way you deserve to be loved, and I'm not that person. I know the wedding is planned, I know people have bought tickets, I know this is going to be embarrassing and expensive, and I'll take care of all of it. But I can't go through with this. I won't." There was a long silence. Then, "Yes, there's someone else. Someone I met here. Someone who made me realize what I've been missing." Another pause. "No, you don't know her. No one knows her. And that's not why I'm doing this. I'm doing this because I should have done it 3 months ago, and I was too afraid of disappointing everyone, to be honest." The conversation went on for another 20 minutes, Veronica apparently cycling through shock and anger and disbelief. At one point, Nathan said, "I'll buy out your parents' investment in the company. I'll make sure you're compensated for your time. I'll do whatever you need to make this right." Which should have told me everything I needed to know about who Veronica was and what their relationship had really been about. When he finally hung up, he looked relieved and terrified at the same time. "It's done," he said. "I'm free." But he wasn't free. Neither of us were. We just traded one cage for another, one set of expectations for a different kind of pressure. Because now we had to figure out what we were, what this thing between us was supposed to become when we left the cabin and went back to the real world. December 26th. The storm had passed sometime during the night, leaving behind this pristine white wonderland that looked like something from a postcard. We should have been celebrating, should have been excited about the future we were supposedly building together. Instead, there was this tension in the air, this unspoken question hanging between us about what happens next. Nathan's phone started ringing nonstop. His business partners, his family, his friends, everyone wanted to know what the hell he was thinking, calling off his wedding 6 days before it was supposed to happen. Veronica had apparently told everyone that he'd lost his mind, that he'd had some kind of breakdown in the mountains, that there was another woman but she was no one important, just some random person he'd met on a ski slope. "I need to go back to the resort," Nathan said finally. "I need to handle this in person, deal with the fallout. Come with me. Stay with me. Let's figure this out together." And I wanted to. God, I wanted to so badly. But something in my gut was screaming that this was wrong, that I was about to make the same mistake I'd made with my ex-husband, letting a man reshape my life to fit his needs. "I need to go home," I said. "I need to go back to Ohio and think about this clearly, without the romance of the cabin and the snow and the feeling that we're living in some kind of fairy tale." "This isn't a fairy tale," Nathan said. "This is real. What we have is real." "Then it'll still be real in a week," I said. "Or a month. Or 6 months. If this is actually something that can work, then it can work after we've both had time to process what we're doing." He didn't like it, but he understood. We skied down to the resort together, and it was like returning from a different planet. The crowds, the noise, the normalcy of it all felt jarring after 3 days of isolation. At the base of the slopes, Nathan pulled me aside. "I'm going to come to Ohio," he said. "Give me 2 weeks to handle everything here, to officially end things with Veronica, to deal with my business. And then I'm coming to Ohio, and we're going to figure out how to make this work." "Okay," I said, because what else could I say? That I was terrified? That I didn't believe him? That I was already protecting myself for the inevitable moment when he realized I wasn't worth appending his entire life for? We kissed goodbye right there in front of everyone. This long, deep kiss that made people stare and whisper. And then I got in the shuttle to the airport, and Nathan went back to whatever luxury hotel he was staying at, and we went back to being people from 2 different worlds. The flight home was turbulent, matching the storm in my head. I kept replaying the last 3 days, trying to figure out if it had been real, or if I'd just gotten caught up in some kind of vacation romance that would evaporate the second real-life hit. I thought about Nathan breaking off his engagement, about the conviction in his voice when he told Veronica he couldn't marry her. I thought about the way he'd looked at me, the way he'd touched me, the way he'd said "I see you" like it was a promise. I got back to my apartment in Ohio on December 27th, and it felt even smaller and shabbier than I remembered. There was a stack of Christmas cards from my students on the kitchen counter where I'd left them, drawings and messages that said things like, "Miss Thompson is the best teacher in the world," and "I love you, Miss Thompson." My real life, waiting for me exactly where I'd left it. Jackie came over that night with wine and demanded to know everything. I told her the whole story, and with every word, it sounded more and more ridiculous. A tech billionaire. A snowstorm. A cabin. A broken engagement. Me, Rebecca Thompson from Ohio, somehow at the center of it all. "Girl," Jackie said when I finished, "you are either living the world's best romance novel, or you are about to get your heart absolutely shattered. There is no in-between here." "I know," I said. "Believe me, I know." Nathan texted me every day. Good morning messages. Pictures of meetings he was sitting in, looking bored. Updates on the Veronica situation, which was apparently messy and expensive and exactly as dramatic as you'd expect when a billionaire calls off a society wedding. He sent me articles about Columbus, Ohio, asking what the good restaurants were, where I liked to hang out, what I did for fun. He was making an effort, trying to show me he was serious about us. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. That any second now, he'd realize this was insane, that he'd lost his mind in that cabin, that I was just a rebound from a failed engagement and not someone worth actually restructuring his life for. New Year's Eve, the day Nathan was supposed to have gotten married to Veronica. He called me at midnight. "I'm not at a wedding," he said. "I'm in my apartment in San Francisco alone, thinking about a kindergarten teacher in Ohio who crashed into me on a ski slope and changed my entire life." "Nathan," I said, my voice breaking. "2 more weeks," he said. "I promise. 2 more weeks and I'm coming to see you, and we're going to figure this out." January 4th, I went back to work. My students were excited to see me, hugging my legs and telling me about their Christmas presents and asking if I'd had a good vacation. Little Jaden asked if I'd gotten a boyfriend, because his mom said Miss Thompson was too pretty to be single. I laughed it off, but the question stuck with me all day. Did I have a boyfriend? Was that what Nathan was? Could you even call someone your boyfriend when you'd known them for 3 days and then not seen them for 2 weeks? January 7th. Nathan's texts got less frequent. He was dealing with something complicated at work, he said. Veronica was causing problems, threatening to sue for breach of contract or emotional damages or something equally ridiculous. His lawyers were handling it, but it required his attention. I told him I understood, that he should focus on what he needed to focus on, that I wasn't going anywhere. But I was lying. I was already going somewhere, already pulling back, already protecting myself for what I knew was coming. January 10th, I took a pregnancy test. My period was late, which wasn't unusual for me, especially when I was stressed. But something made me buy the test anyway, something made me pee on that stick and wait those 3 endless minutes, and something made my heart stop when I saw those 2 pink lines. Pregnant. I was pregnant with Nathan Cross's baby after 3 days in a cabin and a broken engagement and a relationship that might not even be real. I called Nathan immediately, my hands shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone. It went to voicemail. I hung up and called again. Voicemail again. I sent a text, "Call me. It's urgent." And then I sat on my bathroom floor and waited. An hour later, my phone rang. But it wasn't Nathan. It was a woman's voice, cold and professional. "Is this Rebecca Thompson?" "Yes," I said, fear clutching my chest. "This is Amanda Burke, Mr. Cross's attorney. Mr. Cross has asked me to contact you regarding the recent situation between the 2 of you." The world tilted. "What situation?" "Put Nathan on the phone. Mr. Cross is currently unavailable. He's asked me to inform you that while he greatly enjoyed the time you spent together in Colorado, he's realized that pursuing a relationship at this time would not be in either of your best interests. He wants you to know that he takes full responsibility for giving you the wrong impression about the nature of your connection, and he hopes you can part as friends." I couldn't breathe. "You're dumping me?" "He's sending his lawyer to dump me. Mr. Cross is also prepared to offer you a settlement to compensate you for any inconvenience or emotional distress this situation may have caused. We're prepared to offer you $176,000 wired directly to your account in exchange for your signature on a non-disclosure agreement. You would agree not to discuss your relationship with Mr. Cross publicly or to contact him in the future. $176,000. The exact amount that would change my life. Pay off my credit cards, my student loans, give me a cushion for the first time in my adult life. Blood money. Guilt money. Shut up and go away money. I'm pregnant, I said into the phone, and the silence on the other end was deafening. I see, Amanda Burke said finally, her professional tone cracking just slightly. Mr. Cross will need to verify paternity before any further discussions can take place regarding that situation. In the meantime, the settlement offer stands as is, but obviously this changes the parameters of what we're discussing. I don't want his money, I said. I want to talk to Nathan. Put him on the phone. As I said, Mr. Cross is unavailable. I'll relay your message about the pregnancy to him, and I'm sure he'll be in touch through the appropriate channels once he's consulted with his legal team about the best way to proceed. She hung up. Just like that, ended the call, and I was left sitting on my bathroom floor holding a positive pregnancy test and the shattered pieces of something I'd been stupid enough to think was real. I didn't eat for 2 days. I called in sick to work, which I never do, And I just lay in my bed staring at the ceiling trying to understand what had happened. Had the entire thing been a lie? Had Nathan been playing me from the start? Or had he genuinely meant everything he said in that cabin and then gotten back to his real life and realized how insane it all was? Jackie came over on January 12th and literally forced me to eat soup and tell her what happened. When I finished, she was quiet for a long minute, and then she said something I'll never forget. "Becky, I'm going to say this with love, but you need to hear it. You can't save yourself by letting another man define your worth. Not your ex-husband, not Nathan Cross, not anyone. You are not defective because you couldn't have kids with your ex. You are not invisible because your marriage ended. You are not pathetic because you fell for a guy who turned out to be a coward. You are a woman who took a chance on feeling something again, and yeah, it blew up in your face, but at least you tried. At least you're still alive enough to get hurt." "I'm pregnant," I whispered. "I'm pregnant with a billionaire's baby, and he sent his lawyer to pay me off like I'm some kind of problem to be solved." "Then you have a decision to make," Jackie said. "You can take the money and the NDA and disappear, raise this baby on your own and never look back. Or you can fight. You can make him acknowledge what he did, make him take responsibility, make him see you again instead of hiding behind lawyers and settlements." I thought about it for days. The money would make everything easier. I could move to a better apartment, afford childcare, give my baby a life that didn't involve struggling paycheck to paycheck. I could sign the NDA and never have to see Nathan Cross again, never have to face the humiliation of being the woman he had a 3-day fling with and then discarded. But there was this other part of me, this part that had been growing stronger since the divorce, that was absolutely furious. Furious at being made invisible again. Furious at being reduced to a problem that could be solved with money. Furious at Nathan for being exactly like every other man who'd ever disappointed me. All talk about seeing me and wanting me, but ultimately just another coward who couldn't handle the reality of choosing something difficult. January 15th. I got a letter from Amanda Burke. Not an email, an actual physical letter delivered by courier to my apartment. Inside was a check for $176,000 and a non-disclosure agreement 8 pages long. There was also a paternity test kit and instructions to send a DNA sample to a specific lab, with a note that Mr. Cross would be happy to discuss arrangements for the child once paternity was established, but that any such arrangements would be handled through legal channels and would not involve a romantic relationship between myself and Mr. Cross. I tore up the check, just ripped it into tiny pieces and threw it in the trash. The NDA I kept. I wanted to remember what it felt like to be valued at exactly $176,000. I did send the paternity test, though. Not because I needed Nathan's money or permission or involvement, but because I wanted him to know for certain that he'd created a life with someone he was now pretending didn't exist. I wanted him to have to live with that knowledge, to carry it around like I was going to carry this baby. The results came back 3 weeks later. 99.99% probability that Nathan Cross was the father. Within 24 hours, Amanda Burke called me again. Mr. Cross was prepared to offer a substantial child support payment, she said. He would take full financial responsibility for the child. He was also prepared to increase the settlement offer to $500,000 if I would agree to limit his involvement to financial support only, no custody, no visitation, just monthly payments deposited directly to my account. "Tell Mr. Cross," I said slowly, "that he can take his money and his settlement and his cowardice and shove it all straight to hell. I don't want anything from him. Not one single dollar. I will raise this child on my own, and they will never know their father was a man who valued his comfort over their existence." "Ms. Thompson," Amanda Burke said, and for the first time she sounded almost human, "I understand you're angry, but you should really consider the practical implications of what you're saying. Mr. Cross is offering you financial security for you and your child. That's not something to dismiss lightly. I'd rather be poor and honest than rich and bought," I said, and I hung up. That should have been the end of it. I should have moved on, focused on my pregnancy, prepared for single motherhood, and let Nathan Cross fade into a cautionary tale about vacation romances and billionaires who can't handle real emotions. But life has a way of refusing to follow the script you write for it. March 3rd, I was 7 months pregnant and huge, waddling around my classroom trying to teach phonics to 23 kindergartners who were more interested in my belly than the alphabet. It was the middle of the afternoon, about an hour before dismissal, when the principal's secretary came to my door and said I had a visitor in the main office. I wasn't expecting anyone. Jackie was at work, my mother was in Florida visiting her sister, and I'd made it very clear to Amanda Burke that I didn't want any more contact from Nathan's legal team. But I handed my class over to the secretary and made my way to the office, my back aching and my feet swollen in shoes that barely fit anymore. Nathan Cross was sitting in the waiting area of Riverside Elementary School, looking completely out of place in his expensive suit and his air of wealth and power. He stood up when he saw me, his eyes going immediately to my very pregnant belly, and the expression on his face was something I couldn't quite read. Shock, maybe. Or regret. Or fear. "What are you doing here?" I said, and I was proud of how steady my voice was. "I needed to see you," he said. "I needed to talk to you in person, not through lawyers and phone calls and letters." "You had months to talk to me in person," I said. "You chose lawyers and money instead. So whatever you need to say now, I don't need to hear it." I turned to leave, but he followed me out of the office, out into the hallway where student artwork lined the walls, and the smell of cafeteria lunch still lingered in the air. "Rebecca, please. Just give me 5 minutes. I'm teaching," I said. "I have a classroom full of 5-year-olds who need me. Unlike some people, I don't abandon my responsibilities when they get complicated." That hit him. I could see it in the way he flinched, the way his jaw tightened. "I know I hurt you," he said quietly. "I know I was a coward. I know I handled everything in the worst possible way. But I need you to understand why." "I don't care why," I said, but I stopped walking. Because as much as I wanted to be strong enough to walk away, there was still a part of me that needed to hear this, needed to understand how we went from that cabin to this hallway. Nathan looked around at the elementary school, at the colorful bulletin boards and the tiny chairs and the world that was so completely foreign to his usual environment. When I got back to San Francisco after the cabin, reality hit me like a freight train. Veronica wasn't just angry about the broken engagement. She was vindictive. She went to my business partners and told them I was having a breakdown, that I was making erratic decisions, that maybe they should question my leadership of the company. She threatened to expose some financial dealings from years ago that were legal but looked bad. She essentially held my entire empire hostage and said she'd burn it all down unless I got back in line. "So you chose your empire," I said. "You chose money and power over me. Over us. Over your own child." "I chose survival," Nathan said. "And yes, that makes me a coward. That makes me exactly the kind of man I swore I'd never become. But you have to understand, Veronica wasn't just threatening me. She was threatening you. She dug up everything about you, your ex-husband, your finances, your job. She said she'd make your life hell, get you fired, ruin your reputation, make it impossible for you to work as a teacher anywhere. And I believed her because I've seen what she's capable of when someone crosses her." I laughed, harsh and bitter. "So you were protecting me? Is that the story you're telling yourself? You sent your lawyer with hush money and an NDA because you were protecting me." "I was trying to give you a clean exit," he said. "I was trying to give you enough money that you could start over somewhere safe, somewhere Veronica couldn't touch you. I thought if I paid you off and made it clear we were done, she'd leave you alone." "You thought wrong," I said. "You want to know what would have protected me? You standing up for me. You standing up for us. You being brave enough to fight for something real instead of hiding behind lawyers and money and excuses." "You're right," Nathan said, and the defeated way he said it made me really look at him for the first time since he'd walked into my school. He looked terrible. Tired, older, like he'd aged years in the 3 months since I'd seen him. "You're absolutely right. I was a coward and I hurt you and I can't take that back. But I'm here now. I've spent the last 3 months trying to extract myself from Veronica's threats, trying to protect my company while also protecting you from the fallout. And I'm here to tell you that I'm done. I'm done letting fear control my decisions. I'm done letting other people dictate my life. I'm done pretending that what happened between us in that cabin wasn't the realest thing I've felt in my entire life. It's too late," I said, and I felt tears starting to well up, hormones and exhaustion and 3 months of suppressed emotion all hitting me at once. "You broke something, Nathan. You broke trust. You broke faith. You broke me a little bit. And I put myself back together without you. And I realized I don't need you. I don't need your money. I don't need your protection. And I don't need your regret. What about our child? He asked quietly. Don't they need a father? They need a father who shows up, I said. Not one who sends lawyers and checks and conditions. Not one who only appears when it's convenient or when he's finally dealt with his ex-fiance's threats. They need someone reliable and present and brave enough to be there even when it's hard. Can you be that person, Nathan? Or are you going to disappear again the next time things get complicated? He didn't answer right away. He looked at me, at my pregnant belly, at the elementary school hallway that represented my real life, the life that existed outside of luxury cabins and snowstorms and moments outside of time. And I could see him trying to picture it, trying to imagine himself in this world, in my world, being the kind of father who showed up to kindergarten concerts and parent-teacher conferences and ordinary Tuesday nights. I don't know, he said finally, and I appreciated the honesty even as it broke my heart a little more. I don't know if I can be that person. I've never been that person. But I want to try. I want to be in my child's life, in your life, if you'll let me. Not as some distant checkbook, but as someone who's actually present. Talk is cheap, I said. You said a lot of pretty words in that cabin too, and look how that turned out. Then let me prove it, he said. Let me show you I'm serious this time. I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm just asking for a chance to do better. I should have said no. Every self-preservation instinct I had was screaming at me to protect myself and my baby from another round of disappointment and abandonment. But there was this tiny voice in the back of my head, the voice that had convinced me to crash into him on that ski slope, the voice that had said yes to the cabin and yes to taking a chance on feeling something again, and that voice was saying maybe. Maybe people can change. Maybe second chances are worth the risk. Maybe. You can come to the ultrasound, I said finally. Next Tuesday at 3:30. If you show up, if you're actually there, we can talk about what comes next. But if you don't show up, if you send Amanda Burke or some other representative, then you've made your choice, and I never want to hear from you again. I'll be there, Nathan said. I promise. Don't promise, I said. Just do it. I went back to my classroom and Nathan left, and I spent the rest of the day trying to focus on teaching colors and shapes while my mind raced with possibilities and fears and the dangerous, terrifying hope that maybe this time would be different. Tuesday came. I drove myself to the doctor's office, telling myself the whole way that Nathan wouldn't show up, that I needed to be prepared for disappointment, that hoping for anything different was just setting myself up for more pain. I checked in at reception, sat in the waiting room with all the other pregnant women and their partners, and I tried not to watch the door. 3:25. No Nathan. 3:28. Still no Nathan. 3:30, they called my name, and I stood up to go back, and that's when the door opened and Nathan Cross walked in, slightly out of breath like he'd been running, looking around frantically until he spotted me. I'm here, he said, crossing the waiting room in long strides. I'm sorry I'm late. There was traffic and I couldn't find parking, and I ran from 3 blocks away. But I'm here. He was here. He'd actually shown up. The ultrasound was surreal. Lying on that table with Nathan standing next to me, both of us staring at the screen as the technician pointed out hands and feet and a perfectly formed spine, listening to the rapid heartbeat that filled the room with sound and possibility. The technician asked if we wanted to know the sex, and we both said yes at the same time, and when she told us it was a girl, Nathan reached for my hand and I let him take it. A girl. We were having a girl. After the appointment, we sat in my car in the parking lot and talked for 2 hours. Really talked. Without lawyers or distance or the safety of phone screens between us. Nathan told me everything that had happened with Veronica, how she'd finally backed off after he'd paid her parents back for their investment in his company and given her a settlement that was apparently so large it made the news in business circles. He told me he'd stepped down as CEO of his company, taking a less active role so he could have more time and flexibility. He told me he'd bought a house in Columbus, Ohio, just bought it outright without even seeing it in person first, because he wanted to be close to his daughter, to be part of her life from day one. You bought a house here? I said, incredulous. In Columbus? In your neighborhood, actually, he said, looking sheepish. 3 streets over from your apartment. I know it's creepy, I know it's probably too much, but I wanted you to know I'm serious. I'm not staying in San Francisco and flying in once a month for birthdays. I'm moving here. I'm restructuring my entire life to be close to my daughter and to you. I haven't said I want you close to me, I pointed out. I said you could come to the ultrasound. That doesn't mean we're together, Nathan. That doesn't mean I've forgiven you or trust you or want you in my life beyond co-parenting. I know, he said. And I'm not asking for more than you're willing to give. But I'm going to be here, Rebecca. I'm going to show up to every appointment, every milestone, every moment you'll let me be part of. And maybe eventually you'll see that I've changed, that I'm not the man who sent his lawyer to pay you off. Or maybe you won't, and we'll just be two parents raising a daughter together. Either way, I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere. He kept his word. Over the next 2 months, as my pregnancy progressed and my due date approached, Nathan showed up for everything. Every doctor's appointment, every childbirth class, even the ridiculous baby store trip where we spent 3 hours picking out a crib and a changing table and all the million things babies apparently need. He didn't try to buy my forgiveness with expensive gifts or elaborate gestures. He just showed up, consistently and reliably, proving with actions instead of words that he meant what he said. It was strange, having him in my life but not really being with him. We were friendly, cooperative, focused on preparing for the baby, but there was this careful distance between us, this wall I'd built to protect myself from getting hurt again. He never pushed, never tried to cross the boundaries I'd set, never brought up the cabin or what we'd had there, or whether we could ever have that again. But sometimes, I'd catch him looking at me with this expression that made my chest tight, this mix of longing and regret and something that looked like love. And sometimes I'd let myself remember what it felt like in that cabin, when we were just two people outside of time, before reality and fear and other people's expectations came crushing in. May 7th. My water broke at 2 a.m, 3 days before my due date. I called Nathan in a panic, and he was at my apartment in 15 minutes, helping me get to the hospital, staying calm while I absolutely was not calm. Labor was long and difficult, and involved more screaming and cursing than I'd like to admit. Nathan held my hand through all of it, let me squeeze until I probably broke a few of his fingers, never once complained or tried to leave or acted like he wanted to be anywhere else. At 7:43 a.m, our daughter was born. 6 pounds, 9 ounces, perfect in every way that matters. The nurse put her in my arms, and I looked down at this tiny person we'd created in a cabin during a snowstorm, this person who existed because I'd crashed into a stranger on a ski slope and we'd been reckless and selfish and brave enough to grab onto something real, even if only for 3 days. She needs a name, the nurse said gently. I looked at Nathan, who was staring at our daughter with tears streaming down his face, this powerful billionaire completely undone by 6 pounds of newborn baby. What do you think? I asked him. Hope, he said without hesitation. Her name should be Hope, because that's what she represents. Hope that we can do better, hope that second chances are real, hope that something good can come from even the biggest mistakes. Hope Thompson Cross. We agreed she'd have both our last names, that we'd share custody and decision-making, that we'd figure out how to be a family, even if we weren't together in the traditional sense. The hospital paperwork was complicated when one parent is a billionaire and the other is a kindergarten teacher, but we made it work. The first week home with Hope was chaos. I'd read all the books, taken all the classes, thought I was prepared. But nothing actually prepares you for the reality of a newborn who needs to eat every 2 hours and cries for reasons you can't understand and makes you question every decision you've ever made. Nathan essentially moved into my tiny apartment, sleeping on my couch, taking night shifts so I could rest, learning how to change diapers and make bottles and soothe a fussy baby at 3 a.m. It was domestic and intimate and terrifying. Having him in my space, seeing him in sweatpants and old t-shirts instead of expensive suits, watching him figure out fatherhood in real time, it was breaking down the walls I'd built. I didn't want to feel what I was starting to feel, didn't want to let myself hope again that maybe this could be something more than co-parenting. But Hope had other ideas. Babies have this way of forcing people together, of creating moments that are undeniably intimate, even when you're trying to maintain distance. Late-night feedings where we'd sit on opposite ends of the couch, passing our daughter back and forth, talking quietly about nothing important. Bath times where we'd work together to wash this tiny squirming person without drowning her. The first time Hope smiled, a real smile, and Nathan and I looked at each other and both started crying because our daughter was perfect and we'd made her together. 3 weeks after Hope was born, Nathan said something that changed everything. We were sitting on my couch at 2 a.m, Hope asleep between us, both of us exhausted and covered in various baby fluids, and he just said, "I love you. I never stopped loving you. I know I don't deserve another chance. I know I broke your trust and hurt you and proved I was exactly the kind of man you shouldn't let back in. But I love you, Rebecca. I love you for crashing into me on that mountain. I love you for being brave enough to take a chance on feeling something again. I love you for being an incredible mother to our daughter. I love you for not needing my money or my status or anything I can buy you. I love you for making me want to be better than I've ever been." I didn't answer right away. I looked at our sleeping daughter, at this man who'd broken my heart and then spent months putting it back together piece by piece through consistent action instead of empty words. I thought about my ex-husband, about how I'd settled for someone who made me invisible because I didn't think I deserved more. I thought about the woman I'd been 6 months ago, maxing out her credit card to take a ski trip alone because she was tired of waiting for her life to start. I thought about everything that had happened since that collision on the slopes, all the pain and the hope and the terrifying vulnerability of letting myself want something real. "I love you too," I said finally. "I've loved you since that cabin, and I hated myself for it, and I tried to stop, but I couldn't. And that terrifies me, Nathan, because loving you means trusting you, and you broke that trust. How do I know you won't break it again?" "You don't," he said honestly. "You can't know that. I can't guarantee I'll never disappoint you or make mistakes or do something that hurts you. But I can guarantee that I'll show up. I'll be here every day, choosing you and hope over everything else. I'll be here when it's easy and when it's hard and when it's boring and when it's terrifying. I'll be here, Rebecca. That's the only promise I can make, and it's the only one that matters." We didn't kiss that night. We just sat there on the couch with our sleeping daughter between us, holding hands across her tiny body, making a silent promise to try. To be brave enough to believe in second chances, to trust that sometimes people can change, to hope that crashing into each other on a ski slope was the beginning of something real instead of just a beautiful mistake. The months that followed were a learning curve. Nathan did move into that house he'd bought 3 streets over, and we developed a rhythm. He'd come over every morning before I left for work, staying with Hope while I taught kindergarten. I'd come home for lunch and we'd swap, him going to his office or handling business calls while I took care of the baby. Evenings, we'd usually spend together, the 3 of us figuring out this family thing. It wasn't a traditional relationship. We weren't technically together, weren't officially a couple, but we were something. We were parents and partners, and slowly, carefully, we were becoming more. There were date nights, just the 2 of us when Jackie would babysit, where we'd go to normal restaurants and talk about normal things and try to figure out who we were outside of being Hope's parents. There were family outings to the park and the zoo and all the places parents take babies who are too young to remember any of it. There were nights when Nathan would stay late, when staying late turned into falling asleep on my couch, when falling asleep on my couch turned into sleeping in my bed, when sleeping in my bed turned into the kind of intimacy we'd had in that cabin but deeper now, weighted with all the history and pain and fighting for it that makes love real instead of just exciting. By the time Hope was 6 months old, Nathan had essentially moved back into my apartment. Not officially, he still kept his house and some of his stuff there, but he was with us more than he was anywhere else. My tiny apartment was cramped with a billionaire, a kindergarten teacher, and a baby, but it was also full in a way it had never been before. That's when Nathan proposed. Not dramatically, not with a ring hidden in champagne or a flash mob or anything billionaires probably usually do. Just the 2 of us sitting on my couch after we'd put Hope down for the night, and him turning to me and saying, "Marry me." Not because it's expected or appropriate or because we have a daughter together. Marry me because I can't imagine my life without you in it, because you make me want to be better, because you see me in a way no one else ever has. Marry me because we crashed into each other and changed each other's lives, and I don't want to go back to who I was before. I said yes. Of course I said yes. Because sometimes you have to be brave enough to believe that people can change, that second chances are real, that crashing into a stranger on a ski slope can lead to something extraordinary if you're willing to fight for it. We got married 3 months later, small ceremony, just close friends and family. I wore a simple dress, nothing fancy, and Nathan wore a suit, and Hope was there in a little white dress, being held by Jackie while we said our vows. We promised to show up for each other, to be brave when we wanted to be safe, to choose each other every single day, even when it would be easier not to. The reception was at Nathan's house, the one he'd bought in Columbus that had sat mostly empty for months. He'd had it renovated while we were planning the wedding, turned it into a real home instead of just a house. There was a nursery for Hope, painted soft yellow with clouds on the ceiling. There was an office for me, because Nathan insisted I needed space to write, to finally chase that dream I'd given up on years ago. There was a kitchen big enough for both of us to cook in, a backyard with a swing set for when Hope got bigger, a life that was ours. At the reception, my mother pulled me aside, tears in her eyes. "I'm so proud of you, baby girl. I know the divorce was hard. I know you thought you'd never find love again. But look at you now. Look at this beautiful life you've built." "I didn't build it," I said, watching Nathan across the room, holding our daughter and talking to my students who'd come to the wedding because they loved Miss Thompson and wanted to meet her new family. "I crashed into it. Literally crashed into it on a ski slope because I was desperate and lonely and bad at skiing." My mother laughed. "Sometimes the best things in life start with a collision. Sometimes you have to crash into something before you can recognize it's what you needed all along." She was right. I'd spent so many years being careful, being safe, staying in lanes that were comfortable even when they made me miserable. And then I'd done one reckless thing, crashed into a stranger on a mountain, and my entire life had changed. The first year of marriage was an adjustment. Nathan struggled with going from bachelor billionaire to married father living in Ohio. I struggled with accepting help, with letting someone take care of me without feeling like I was losing myself in the process. We fought sometimes, had disagreements about parenting and money, and whose turn it was to change the diaper. But we also laughed a lot, loved a lot, built a life that was messy and imperfect and absolutely ours. Nathan never went back to San Francisco full-time. He ran his businesses remotely, took meetings from Columbus, flew out only when absolutely necessary. He coached Hope's Little League team when she got older, came to every school concert and parent-teacher conference, was the dad who volunteered for field trips and class parties. He was present in a way my ex-husband never was, in a way I'd never thought billionaires could be. I went back to teaching after maternity leave, but I also started writing. Little things at first, personal essays about motherhood and divorce and second chances. Nathan encouraged me, read everything I wrote, gently pushed me to submit things to magazines and websites. When my first piece got published, about crashing into a stranger and finding love, it went viral. People connected with the story, with the idea that sometimes the best things in life start with being brave enough to risk collision. That piece led to more opportunities. A book deal, a small one but real. Speaking engagements where I'd talk about resilience and second chances, and the courage it takes to stay open to love even after you've been hurt. I never stopped teaching, never gave up my kindergarten classroom, but I added to my life instead of replacing one thing with another. Hope grew up surrounded by love, unaware that her family was unusual, that most kids don't have parents where one is a billionaire and the other is a public school teacher. To her, we were just mom and dad, the people who read her bedtime stories and made her breakfast and showed up to every soccer game and school play. Nathan made sure she understood the value of money, that wealth was a responsibility, not an identity, that kindness mattered more than status. When Hope was 5 years old, the same age as my kindergarten students, she asked me how I met Daddy. We were sitting in her room, the one painted yellow with clouds on the ceiling, reading stories before bed. And I told her a slightly sanitized version of the truth. I told her about being sad after my first marriage ended, about taking a trip alone to Colorado, about crashing into a handsome man on a ski slope because I was a terrible skier. I told her about a snowstorm and a cabin and 3 days that changed everything. I told her about second chances and being brave and how sometimes love is messy and complicated before it becomes beautiful. "So you crashed into Daddy?" Hope said, her eyes wide. "On purpose." Sort of, I admitted. I wanted to meet him, and I didn't know any other way to make him notice me. Hope considered this seriously. "That was silly, Mommy. You could have just said hello." "You're absolutely right," I said, kissing her forehead. "But sometimes we do silly things when we're lonely and looking for something to change. The important thing is what you do after the crash. Do you run away, or do you stay and see where it leads?" "You stayed," Hope said. "I stayed," I agreed. "And so did your daddy, eventually." And that made all the difference. Nathan and I had 2 more children after Hope. A boy we named Jack, born 3 years after Hope, who had Nathan's dark hair and my stubborn streak. And then, unexpectedly, twins, a boy and girl we named Oliver and Grace, born when I was 43 and thought my baby-making days were long over. 4 children total. A chaotic, beautiful family that filled up Nathan's big house and kept us both exhausted and grateful in equal measure. The irony wasn't lost on me. After years of thinking I was broken, unable to have children, I'd become a mother of 4. My ex-husband, the one who'd made me feel defective, had ended up marrying the dental hygienist, and they'd never had kids, from what I heard through mutual friends. Meanwhile, I was drowning in children and diapers and the beautiful chaos of a full house. My relationship with Nathan deepened over the years in ways I never expected. The passion from the cabin never entirely went away, but it was joined by something steadier, something that came from choosing each other every day for years. We had anniversary traditions, date nights that were sacred no matter how busy life got, inside jokes that made our kids roll their eyes. We fought sometimes, had periods where we got on each other's nerves, went through challenges that tested our commitment. But we always came back to that core truth. We'd crashed into each other and decided to stay, and that decision was worth protecting. Nathan's wealth became less and less relevant to our daily life. Yes, we lived comfortably. Yes, our kids had opportunities most children don't get, but Nathan insisted we raise them as normally as possible. They went to public school, wore regular clothes, did chores, and earned allowances. We took family vacations, but we also had lazy Saturdays where we stayed in our pajamas all day and watched movies. Nathan coached soccer and helped with homework and packed lunches, just like any other dad. People asked me sometimes if it was hard, being married to someone so wealthy when I came from such different circumstances. And honestly, the money was the least interesting part of our relationship. What mattered was that Nathan saw me, really saw me, in a way my ex-husband never had. He supported my teaching career when he could have easily told me I didn't need to work. He read every word I wrote and gave honest feedback. He parented alongside me instead of leaving all the hard work to me. He showed up consistently and reliably for 20 years. 20 years. That's how long it's been since I crashed into Nathan Cross on that ski slope in Vail. Hope is now 20, studying education in college because she wants to be a teacher like her mom. Jack is 17, brilliant with computers like his dad, already working on his first startup. The twins are 14, in that awkward middle school phase where everything is either the best or the worst with no in-between. I'm 58 now. Nathan is 65. We're not the people we were in that cabin anymore. We're older, softer around the edges, marked by years of raising children and building a life together. But when I look at him across the dinner table, when he reaches for my hand during a movie, when he kisses me goodbye before leaving for a business trip, I still feel echoes of that first collision. That moment when 2 lonely people crashed into each other and decided to be brave. Last Christmas, Nathan surprised me with a trip back to Vail. Just the 2 of us, leaving the kids with my mother, returning to the place where it all started. The resort had changed over the years, gotten even more luxurious and expensive, but the mountains were the same. We skied together, me still not particularly good at it, but better than I was 20 years ago, him patient and encouraging just like he'd been that first day. On Christmas Eve, Nathan led me away from the resort, up toward the North Ridge, to that cabin where we'd spent 3 days falling in love. He'd bought it years ago, he told me, bought it from his friend and kept it exactly as it had been that Christmas when we were trapped by a snowstorm. It was our private retreat now, our secret place, somewhere we could go to remember who we'd been before life got complicated. We spent the night there, just the 2 of us, 20 years older, but still fundamentally the same people who'd crashed into each other and chosen to stay. We made love in front of the same fireplace, talked until 3 in the morning like we had that first night, held each other as snow fell outside the windows and the rest of the world disappeared. Do you ever regret it? Nathan asked me as we lay in bed watching the sun come up over the mountains. Do you ever wish you'd made different choices? Married someone simpler? Had an easier life? I thought about my ex-husband, about the life I'd had before the divorce, before the ski trip, before Nathan. I thought about how invisible I'd felt, how small my world had been, how I'd been waiting for permission to want more. And I thought about the life I had now, Messy and chaotic and full of love and children, and a man who'd spent 20 years proving he could change, could show up, could be better than he'd been. Not even once, I said. Crashing into you was the best terrible decision I ever made. Nathan laughed at that, the deep, genuine laugh that I still loved hearing after all these years. Terrible decision? Oh, it was terrible, I said. Crashing into a stranger, spending 3 days in a cabin with someone I barely knew, getting pregnant, falling in love with someone completely wrong for me on paper. Every rational part of my brain was screaming that it was a mistake. But sometimes the best things in life look like mistakes at first. Sometimes you have to crash into something before you recognize it's exactly what you needed. We went back home the day after Christmas, back to our kids and our real life and the beautiful ordinary chaos that had become our normal. But I carried that trip with me, that reminder of where we'd started and how far we'd come. Hope graduated from college this past spring. We threw a party at our house, invited all her friends and our friends and half her elementary school teachers who remembered her as that sweet kid whose mom taught kindergarten and whose dad coached soccer. During the party, Hope pulled me aside and said, "Mom, I want to tell you something." "What is it, honey?" I asked, worried by the serious expression on her face. "I know the real story," she said, "about how you and Dad met. I know about the engagement Dad broke off, about the pregnancy test, about the lawyer who tried to pay you off. Jackie told me last year when I asked her for the full story. My heart stopped. We'd always sanitized the story for the kids, kept it simple and romantic without all the messy, complicated parts. I never wanted them to know about Nathan's initial cowardice, about the months when I'd thought he'd abandoned us, about how close we'd come to not being a family at all." "Hope, I can explain," I started, but she cut me off. "You don't have to explain, Mom. I just want to tell you that I think it's the most beautiful story I've ever heard. Not because it was easy or perfect, but because it was real. Because both of you were brave enough to fight for each other, even when it was hard, even when you had every reason to walk away. That's what I want someday. Not some fairy tale romance, but something real, something worth fighting for." I started crying right there in the middle of Hope's graduation party, and she hugged me, this beautiful young woman who existed because I'd crashed into a stranger on a ski slope and we'd both been brave enough to choose love even when it was terrifying. Nathan found us a few minutes later, wiping tears off both our faces, and Hope told him she knew the real story. He looked panicked for a moment, afraid she'd think less of him, but Hope just hugged him and said, "You showed up, Dad. When it mattered, you showed up. That's all any of us can ask for." That moment, standing in our backyard with our daughter between us, surrounded by family and friends and a life we'd built from a collision and a snowstorm and 3 days of reckless bravery, I felt something settle in my chest. Contentment, maybe. Or peace. Or just the deep knowing that I'd made the right choice 20 years ago when I'd crashed into Nathan Cross and changed both our lives forever. I'm still teaching kindergarten. 34 years at Riverside Elementary now, watching generation after generation of 5-year-olds learn to read and write and tie their shoes. Some of my former students are bringing their own children to my classroom now, telling them stories about Miss Thompson who taught them the alphabet and read them stories and made them feel special. It's a good life, a meaningful life, the kind of life I'd never have chosen for myself if I hadn't been forced to start over after my divorce. Nathan eventually sold his company completely, stepping away from the tech world to focus on philanthropy and family. He started a foundation that provides educational resources to underfunded schools, making sure teachers like me have the supplies and support we need. He travels less now, spends most of his time in Columbus, goes to Jack's robotics competitions and the twins track meets and Hope's student teaching observations. He's the man he promised he'd be that night in my apartment when he held our newborn daughter and said he'd show up every day. We still go back to that cabin every Christmas, just the two of us. It's become our tradition, our way of remembering who we were before we became Mom and Dad, before life got so full we could barely breathe sometimes. We ski together, though we're both slower and more careful now than we were at 38 and 45. We make love in front of the fireplace. We talk about our kids and our dreams and what we want the next chapter of our lives to look like. We hold each other and watch the snow fall and remember that sometimes the best things in life start with a collision. I published my first book 5 years ago. It's called The Collision, and it's about love and loss and second chances, and the courage it takes to stay open to possibility, even after you've been hurt. It's about a kindergarten teacher who crashes into a billionaire on a ski slope, and they fall in love, and it's messy and complicated and almost falls apart before they figure out how to fight for each other. It's my story, our story, written as honestly as I could write it without betraying the privacy Nathan and I have always tried to maintain. The book did well. Not bestseller level well, but good enough that I got invited to speak at events and appear on podcasts and connect with readers who saw themselves in the story. Women who'd gone through divorces and thought their lives were over. People who'd taken risks on love and had their hearts broken. Anyone who'd ever felt invisible and was looking for permission to believe they deserved more. The most common question I get asked at these events is always the same. How did you know Nathan was worth giving a second chance? How did you know he wouldn't hurt you again? And my answer is always honest. I didn't know. I couldn't know. There are no guarantees in love. No way to protect yourself completely from the risk of getting hurt. But there are actions. There are patterns. There are people who say they'll change and never do, and people who say they'll change and then spend years proving it through consistent behavior. Nathan proved it. Day after day, year after year, he proved he was worth the second chance I gave him. He proved he could be the man he promised to be in that hospital room holding our newborn daughter. He proved that people can change, that cowards can learn to be brave, that sometimes a terrible start can lead to something extraordinary if you're both willing to do the work. I'm not going to lie and say our marriage has been perfect. We've had hard years, years where we fought more than we laughed, years where I questioned whether we'd made the right choice. There was the year Nathan's mother got sick and died, and he spiraled into a depression that lasted months. There was the year Jack got into some trouble at school, and we had to figure out how to parent through it without destroying our relationship in the process. There was the year the twins were 10 and I got sick, really sick, cancer kind of sick, and we both had to face the reality that forever might not be as long as we'd hoped. I'm in remission now, 5 years cancer-free, but that experience changed us, made us more grateful for the ordinary days, more patient with each other's flaws, more willing to say I love you even when we're angry or tired or overwhelmed. It made us realize that the collision that brought us together could have just as easily never happened, that we were lucky to have found each other at all, that wasting time on resentment or taking each other for granted was a luxury we couldn't afford. Our kids are growing up and moving out, starting their own lives, making their own collisions and choices and mistakes. Hope is engaged now, to a man she met in college who treats her with respect and kindness and sees her the way Nathan sees me. Jack is dating someone seriously, a girl who codes and plays video games and laughs at his terrible jokes. The twins are still figuring out who they are, what they want, how to navigate a world that's so much more complicated than it was when I was their age. Nathan and I are entering this new phase of our lives where we're not just parents anymore, where we have to remember how to be a couple without the constant demands of children needing us. It's strange and a little scary and also exciting. We talk about traveling more, about maybe spending winters in warmer climates, about what we want to do with the years we have left. But mostly, we just want to be together. After 20 years, after 4 kids, after building a life from a collision and a cabin and 3 days of being brave enough to feel something real, we just want more time. More mornings waking up next to each other. More nights falling asleep holding hands. More ordinary Tuesday evenings where nothing special happens except that we're together. I think about my ex-husband sometimes, wonder what his life turned out like. I heard through mutual friends that he eventually married the dental hygienist, that they're still together, living in the same town where we used to live. I hope he's happy. I hope he found what he was looking for when he blew up our marriage. I hope he's learned to see people, really see them, instead of just using them as background characters in his own life. But mostly I don't think about him at all. He's part of my past, a chapter that needed to close so the next one could begin. And I'm grateful for that chapter, for the lessons it taught me about what I don't want, about my own worth, about the courage it takes to leave something safe but unfulfilling. If I could go back and talk to 38-year-old Rebecca, standing in that divorce court watching her marriage end, I'd tell her something simple. The ending is also a beginning. The worst day of your life can be the doorway to the best years if you're brave enough to walk through it. And sometimes, walking through it means crashing into a stranger on a ski slope and seeing where the collision takes you. I'd tell her that she's not invisible, not defective, not broken. She's just waiting, hibernating until the right moment comes to bloom again. And when that moment comes, It might not look like she expects. It might be messy and complicated and terrifying. It might involve pregnancy tests and lawyers and months of uncertainty. It might require more courage than she thinks she has. But she has it. She's stronger than she knows. And on the other side of that courage is a life so full and beautiful and real that she'll look back on the divorce as the best terrible thing that ever happened to her. I'd tell her to crash into that man on the ski slope, to say yes to the cabin, to take the risk even though every rational part of her brain is screaming that it's a mistake. Because some mistakes are actually miracles in disguise, and you can't tell the difference until you're brave enough to live through them. I'd tell her that 20 years from now, she'll be standing in her kitchen making breakfast for a house full of children she never thought she'd have, married to a man who sees her and chooses her every single day, living a life she couldn't have imagined in her wildest dreams. And it all starts with one collision, one moment of being reckless enough to crash into possibility, instead of staying safe in loneliness. That's what I tell the women who come to my book events, who read my essays, who email me asking for advice about their own divorces and heartbreaks and second chances. I tell them to be brave, to crash into possibilities, to stay open to love even when it's scary, to give second chances to people who earn them through actions, not just words, to believe that their story isn't over just because one chapter ended badly. Nathan is calling me from downstairs. We're supposed to go to dinner with friends tonight, one of those ordinary Saturday evening plans that make up the fabric of a life. I'll go down in a minute, kiss him hello even though we've been in the same house all day, hold his hand in the car on the way to the restaurant, laugh at his terrible jokes and roll my eyes at his stories I've heard 100 times. And I'll be grateful. So deeply grateful that I was a bad enough skier to crash into him on that mountain. That I was desperate enough and lonely enough and brave enough to aim for collision instead of staying safely invisible. That we both had the courage to fight for what we found in that cabin, even when it would have been easier to walk away. Life is about the collisions, I think. The moments when we crash into something or someone and everything changes. We can spend our whole lives trying to avoid collisions, staying in our lanes, playing it safe, never risking the impact. Or we can aim for the things that scare us, crash into possibilities, and see what emerges from the wreckage. 20 years ago, I crashed into Nathan Cross on a ski slope in Vail, Colorado, and it destroyed the life I thought I was supposed to have. And from that destruction, from that collision and that cabin and those 3 days of being brave enough to feel something real, I built something better. Not perfect, not easy, but real and full and worth every moment of fear and pain and uncertainty it took to get here. Sometimes the best things in life start with a crash. Sometimes you have to collide with your future before you can recognize it. Sometimes you have to be brave enough to aim for impact instead of safety. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, the person you crash into crashes back. And you spend the rest of your lives figuring out how to build something beautiful from the wreckage. That's my story. That's our story. A collision and a cabin and a choice to be brave when it would have been easier to be safe. A pregnancy test and a lawyer's call and months of uncertainty that almost destroyed us before we figured out how to fight for each other. 20 years of showing up, of choosing love, of being better than we thought we could be. It's messy and complicated and imperfect. It's real. And I wouldn't change a single thing. The moral of this story, if there has to be one, is simple. Don't be afraid to crash into your future. Don't let fear or past hurts or other people's expectations keep you playing it safe when something real is calling to you. Take the risk. Crash into possibility. Give second chances to people who earn them. Stay open to love even when it's terrifying. Because somewhere out there might be someone waiting for you to collide with them. Someone who will see you, really see you, in a way no one else has. Someone who will be brave enough to choose you back, to fight for you, to show up day after day and prove that love is worth the risk. And when you find that person, don't let go. Even when it's hard. Even when you're scared. Even when every rational part of your brain is telling you to protect yourself. Hold on. Fight. Be brave. Because the best things in life, the real things, the things that matter most, they're worth crashing for. They're worth the impact and the uncertainty and the risk of getting hurt. They're worth everything. So here I am, 58 years old, 20 years into a marriage that started with a collision on a ski slope. I'm a kindergarten teacher, a wife, a mother of four, a writer, and a woman who learned that invisible is just a state of mind that changes the second you decide you're worth being seen. I'm not special. I'm not extraordinarily brave or wise or strong. I'm just someone who crashed into possibility instead of staying safe in loneliness. Someone who took a risk on feeling something real. Someone who gave a second chance to a man who earned it through years of consistent action. And if I can do it, if I can go from divorced and invisible and broken to this full, beautiful life, then so can you. Whatever collision you're avoiding, whatever possibility you're too scared to crash into, whatever second chance you're too hurt to give, I'm telling you it's worth the risk. Crash into it. See what happens. Stay brave even when you want to run. And maybe, just maybe, you'll look back 20 years from now and realize that the best decision you ever made looked like a mistake at the time. Nathan's calling again. I need to go. But before I do, I want to ask you something. If you're still here, if you've stayed with me through this whole messy, complicated, beautiful story, tell me in the comments where you are and what time it is for you right now. Tell me if you've ever crashed into something and had it change your whole life. Tell me if you're still waiting for your collision or if you've already found it. And if you connected with this story, if it made you feel something or think about your own life differently, hit that subscribe button. Because I'll be back with more stories about love and loss and the courage it takes to keep showing up even when life knocks you down. Next time, I'm going to tell you about what happened with Veronica after Nathan broke off their engagement, because that story has its own twists and turns that you won't believe. So subscribe so you don't miss it. Thank you for listening. Thank you for staying. Thank you for being brave enough to crash into possibilities in your own life. Now go. Be reckless. Take chances. Crash into your future. I promise you, it's worth the impact.